The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the typical arrogance that had defined interstellar politics for over three. Representatives from 47 civilized worlds sat in their climate-controlled pods, each species comfortable in their perfectly regulated environments. The air itself was a careful mixture of gases that wouldn't offend any of the member races, though it left most feeling slightly drowsy. Ambassador Aura of the Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes and gazed down at the holographic display showing the Outer Rim territories. His people had been the unofficial leaders of the Council for 800 years, ever since they developed faster-than-light communication technology that allowed real-time governance across the galaxy. They were proud of their intellectual superiority, their elegant cities that floated above the clouds of there, and their complete mastery over lesser species. The quarterly report shows continued expansion into unclaimed systems, Aura announced, his voice carrying the authority of countless generations of rulers. Sector 7 Alpha has yielded 17 new mining worlds, while Sector 12 Gamma has provided us with 3 agricultural planets suitable for feeding our growing populations. The other ambassadors nodded approvingly. The crystalline hive mind of pulsed with satisfaction, their collective consciousness pleased with the steady acquisition of resources. The aquatic depth swimmers of Oceanus bubbled their agreement through their water-filled communication spheres. Even the militant Saurian Brotherhood, usually quick to question peaceful expansion, seemed content with the Council's progress. "What of the exclusion zones?" asked Ambassador of the Saurian Brotherhood, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been curiosity. "The systems marked as unsuitable for colonization." Aura's expression didn't change, but there was a subtle shift in his posture that suggested mild annoyance. "Those worlds remain off-limits as they have for centuries. The environmental hazards make them unsuitable for any civilized species. High radiation levels, unstable weather patterns, aggressive native fauna, toxic atmospheres. We've classified them as for good reason." The term carried significant weight in galactic politics. It referred to planets so hostile to life that attempting to establish colonies would be tantamount to suicide. The Council had identified approximately 2,000 such worlds throughout their explored territory, each one marked with warning beacons and left alone. It was simply logical. Why waste resources trying to tame planets that would kill any rational being who set foot on them? "Some of our deep space scouts have detected unusual energy signatures from a few of these worlds," reported Ambassador Ra of the Shadow Collective, her ethereal form flickering slightly as she spoke. "Nothing that would suggest they're becoming habitable, but perhaps worth investigating." "Investigated and dismissed," Aura replied curtly. "Our xenobiology teams have analyzed these signatures. They appear to be natural phenomena, volcanic activity, electromagnetic storms, that sort of thing. Nothing that would change our assessment of these worlds as uninhabitable." What the Galactic Council didn't know, what their advanced sensors and sophisticated analysis had failed to detect, was that many of these weren't uninhabited at all. On a small blue and green planet in a system the Council had designated as Exclusion Zone 2847 Delta, an entirely different kind of civilization had been growing for. Earth was everything the Council's definition of a suggested it should be. The planet experienced regular ice ages that would freeze most galactic species solid. Its weather systems produced hurricanes, tornadoes, and thunderstorms that could level entire cities. The continental plates shifted regularly, creating earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The atmosphere contained oxygen at levels that would be toxic to many species, while the presence of water in 3 states created an environment of constant chemical change. Perhaps most terrifyingly, Earth was home to an incredible diversity of life forms that had evolved to kill and consume each other. Predators stalked prey across every environment, from the crushing depths of the oceans to the thin air of mountain peaks. Microscopic organisms waged chemical warfare against larger life forms. Plants evolved toxins and thorns to defend themselves. Even the seemingly peaceful herbivores had developed weapons, horns, hooves, crushing weight, that could end a threat in seconds. Into this chaos had evolved humanity. Dr. Sarah stood in the observation deck of the International Space Station, watching Earth turn slowly below her. From this distance, the planet looked deceptively peaceful. The swirling white clouds hid the massive storm system that was currently battering the eastern seaboard of North America. The blue oceans gave no hint of the crushing pressures and alien life forms that existed in their depths. The green and brown continents showed no sign of the millions of predators, the active volcanoes, the fault lines that could split open at any moment. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said Commander James, floating up beside her. He was a veteran of 3 Mars missions and countless orbital operations, but he still found himself drawn to the observation windows whenever his duties allowed. "Beautiful and terrifying," Sarah agreed. She was the station's xenobiology specialist, though her title was somewhat ironic given that humanity had yet to encounter any alien life. Her job involved studying Earth's most extreme life forms and theorizing about what might be possible on other worlds. "I was just thinking about the presentation I'm giving tomorrow to the Global Defense Council. About the Deep Space Monitoring Project." Sarah nodded. For the past decade, Earth's growing network of space-based telescopes and sensors had been detecting what appeared to be artificial signals from distant star systems. Nothing that clearly indicated intelligent life, but patterns that were too regular to be entirely natural. The signals suggested a vast interstellar civilization, one that had been completely unaware of Earth's existence. "The data is fascinating," Sarah continued. "If our analysis is correct, there's a galactic community out there that includes dozens, maybe hundreds of different species. They seem to have established some kind of government or council system. Their technology is clearly more advanced than ours. They have faster-than-light travel and communication systems we can barely comprehend. And they've never noticed us. That's the strange part. Our solar system should be well within their explored territory, but there's no indication they've ever sent a probe here. No signs that they're even aware Earth exists." Commander was quiet for a moment, watching a massive hurricane spiral across the Pacific. Maybe they looked and decided there was nothing worth investigating. Maybe, or maybe they looked and decided it was too dangerous to investigate. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Humanity had spread across Earth's surface despite every obstacle the planet could throw at them. They'd survived ice ages, eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless smaller disasters. They'd domesticated animals that could kill them, learned to navigate oceans filled with predators, and built cities on geological fault lines. They'd turned one of the galaxy's most hostile environments into home. Meanwhile, a galactic civilization with technology that surpassed humanity's by centuries had apparently taken one look at Earth and decided it was too dangerous to approach. "The really interesting part," Sarah said, "is what this tells us about the rest of the galaxy. If they consider Earth uninhabitable, what does that say about the worlds they do live on?" 3 days later, Doctor's presentation to the Global Defense Council would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The data she'd compiled painted a picture of a galaxy filled with species that had evolved on worlds so gentle and stable that they couldn't conceive of life existing anywhere else. Their definition of a habitable planet was incredibly narrow: stable climate, minimal geological activity, docile native life forms if any, and environmental conditions that varied only within the smallest possible ranges. Earth, with its ice ages and mass extinctions, its hurricanes and earthquakes, its sharks and tigers and venomous snakes, didn't just fail to meet their standards for habitability. It was so far outside their understanding of what was possible that they'd never even considered the possibility that intelligent life might exist there. The presentation would lead to the formation of humanity's first deep space monitoring network, a series of hidden observation posts designed to study this galactic civilization without revealing Earth's existence. What they discovered would force humanity to confront a fundamental question. What happened when a species evolved to survive in hell encountered a galaxy full of species who thought paradise was barely safe enough to live in? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. Admiral reviewed the morning's intelligence reports from her office at Luna Command, humanity's primary military installation on the Moon. The facility had been built into the lunar surface, its corridors and chambers carved from solid rock and protected by multiple layers of radiation shielding. To the rest of the galaxy, Luna would have seemed even more inhospitable than Earth, an airless rock bombarded by cosmic radiation and meteor impacts. To humanity, it was simply another place to build a base. "Admiral, we've got something," said Lieutenant Commander Park, her intelligence liaison. "The Deep Space Array has picked up what looks like a significant military movement in the system." Looked up from her reports. Was barely 4 light-years away, practically next door by galactic standards. If the alien civilization was moving military forces that close to Earth, it could mean anything from a routine patrol to preparation for expansion into Earth's solar system. What kind of movement? At least 200 ships, possibly more. They're using some kind of faster-than-light drive that we can't track directly, but we can detect the gravitational disturbances. They're big ships, Admiral, much bigger than anything we could build. Felt a familiar tightness in her chest. She'd been preparing for this moment for 15 years, ever since humanity first became aware of the galactic civilization. The question had never been whether they would eventually encounter aliens, but whether that encounter would be peaceful or hostile. Any indication of their intentions? That's where it gets interesting. We've managed to decode some of their communications. They're calling it a cleansing operation. They've detected what they describe as unauthorized technological activity in this sector, and they're moving to investigate. Stood and walked to the window that looked out over the lunar surface. Earth hung in the black sky like a blue jewel, beautiful and fragile and completely unaware of what might be coming. Unauthorized technological activity. That would be us. Yes, ma'am. It looks like our radio signals, our satellite networks, maybe even our deep space probes have finally attracted their attention. The question is what we do about it. For 15 years, humanity had debated this scenario. Some argued for immediate contact, believing that peaceful communication was possible with any intelligent species. Others advocated for isolation, hoping that Earth could remain hidden until humanity's technology advanced enough to compete with the galactic powers. Still others pushed for aggressive preparation, building weapons and defenses under the assumption that any alien contact would be hostile. Admiral had always belonged to the third group. "Send word to Earth Command," she said. "Activate Protocol 7. Lieutenant Commander Park's eyes widened slightly. Protocol 7 was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, the transformation of human civilization from a peaceful, exploring species into something that could fight for survival against enemies beyond imagination. It involved mobilizing every resource Earth possessed, converting civilian infrastructure to military use, and preparing humanity's scattered colonies and installations for siege warfare. "Ma'am, are you sure Protocol 7 is?" "Protocol 7 is exactly what we designed it for," interrupted. "An approaching alien fleet with unknown but possibly hostile intentions. We've had 15 years to prepare for this moment, Commander. Now we find out if it was enough." As Lieutenant Commander Park began transmitting the activation codes, Admiral continued staring out at Earth. The planet that had forged humanity in fire and disaster, that had taught them to survive impossible odds and adapt to any environment, was about to face its greatest test. But for the first time in her career, found herself feeling something like pity for their potential enemies. The aliens were used to a galaxy of stable, peaceful worlds inhabited by rational, predictable species. They had no idea what they were approaching. Earth hadn't just produced humans, it had produced humans who thought living next to active volcanoes was reasonable, who built cities in hurricane zones, who went into space not because it was safe, but because it was there. The galaxy was about to meet and they were not going to go quietly. Ambassador Aura received the report while enjoying his morning meditation in the Council Chamber's meditation gardens. The news came through standard diplomatic channels, marked with the routine classifications that indicated another minor policing action in the outer territories. He read through the initial summary with the same mild interest he showed for all such reports. "Cleansing Fleet 7 has been dispatched to investigate unauthorized technological signatures in Sector 12 Alpha," the report stated. "Preliminary analysis suggests primitive radio emissions and crude satellite networks originating from exclusion zone 2847 Delta. Standard protocols will be followed to eliminate contamination and restore sector security." Aura paused in his reading. Exclusion zone 2847 Delta was one of they'd surveyed centuries ago, a chaotic nightmare of a planet with an unstable climate, toxic atmosphere, and hostile native life. The very idea that technological signatures could be originating from such a place was absurd. Perhaps some piece of ancient space debris had crashed on the surface and was now broadcasting automated distress signals. He made a mental note to review the mission report when it became available and continued with his meditation. They had learned long ago that the galaxy was full of minor mysteries and anomalies. Most of them resolved themselves without requiring any significant attention from the Council. This would undoubtedly prove to be another such case. Fleet commander of the Saurian Brotherhood studied the tactical displays aboard his flagship, the dominant Predator. 200 ships spread out in perfect formation behind him, their sleek hulls bristling with energy weapons and defensive systems. The fleet represented the finest military technology the galactic civilization had ever produced, ships that could travel between stars in days, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand the fury of supernovas. Long-range sensors are detecting the source of the unauthorized signals, reported his tactical officer. A single planetary system, third planet from a yellow star. The emissions are definitely artificial, but the patterns are unusual. Examined the data with the clinical precision that had made him one of the Brotherhood's most successful fleet commanders. The technology producing the signals was clearly primitive. Crude radio transmissions, basic digital communications, simple electromagnetic signatures from what appeared to be orbital installations. Nothing that posed any threat to galactic security. Any signs of capability? Minimal. We're detecting a few primitive satellites and what might be a small orbital station. Nothing that could threaten even our scout ships. Then this will be a routine cleansing operation. Signal the fleet. We'll drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the system and complete a full sensor sweep. Once we've identified all technological installations, we'll eliminate them with precision strikes. Standard procedure for dealing with primitive contamination. Had conducted dozens of such operations throughout his career. Occasionally, primitive species developed radio technology or crude satellites before they'd advanced enough to be considered for council membership. The standard response was swift elimination of their technological capability, followed by planetary quarantine until the species either advanced properly or died out naturally. It was considered a mercy primitive species that developed technology too quickly almost always destroyed themselves anyway. Sir, there's something unusual about this system, his science officer reported. We're detecting multiple artificial installations on various planetary bodies, not just the main world, but on several of its moons and even what appears to be a small asteroid. Elaborate. The primitive species seems to have established outposts throughout their solar system. It's unprecedented for a civilization at their technological level. Consider this. Most species barely manage to establish orbit around there before developing faster-than-light travel. The idea of a primitive species spreading throughout their solar system suggested either remarkable persistence or complete ignorance of the dangers involved in space travel. No matter, we'll simply expand our target list to include all technological installations. Signal the fleet to prepare for extended operations. What Fleet Commander didn't understand, what no member of the galactic civilization could understand, was that humanity had spread throughout the solar system not despite the dangers, but because they'd already mastered far worse challenges. Living in space was dangerous, but so was living on Earth. Building bases on airless moons was difficult, but so was surviving ice ages. The Saurian Brotherhood considered the asteroid belt a navigation hazard to be avoided. Humans had turned it into a mining operation. Admiral stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching as humanity's defensive preparations unfolded across dozens of screens. Protocol 7 was proving to be everything its designers had hoped, and more. Within 72 hours of activation, Earth's scattered military installations had transformed into a coordinated defense network. Report from Mars Command, announced Commander Sarah, her communications officer. The orbital defense platforms are fully operational. 12 heavy beam weapons, 36 missile pods, and enough fighters to screen the entire Martian system. Luna Base defensive systems. All online, the mass drivers are loaded and targeted. Point defense networks are active. The underground bunkers can support our population for up to 6 months. And Earth. That's where it gets interesting. Every major nation has contributed to the defense grid. The orbital weapons platforms are fully armed, the ground-based laser arrays are operational, and they've managed to convert 17 industrial facilities to military production in less than 3 days. Nodded with grim satisfaction. Protocol 7 wasn't just a military plan, it was a complete transformation of human civilization's priorities. Every resource, every technology, every scientific advancement humanity had made was being redirected toward a single goal: survival. What about the colony ships? Exodus fleet is preparing for departure. If Earth falls, they'll carry approximately 50,000 humans to the Alpha system, along with complete genetic banks and technological databases. The backup colonies at Europa and Titan are being fortified as well. The Exodus fleet represented humanity's ultimate contingency, a collection of the fastest ships they could build, designed to carry the remnants of human civilization beyond the reach of any alien threat. It was a desperate plan, but then again, humanity specialized in desperate plans. "Admiral, we're receiving long-range sensor data," reported Lieutenant Commander Park. "The alien fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system." The main display shifted to show the outer solar system, where 200 alien ships had materialized near the orbit of Pluto. Even at maximum magnification, they appeared as little more than dots of light, but the sensor data told the real story. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Their energy signatures suggested power systems that dwarfed Earth's entire electrical grid. Their weapons could probably reduce cities to ash from orbit. Analysis. Based on their formation and approach vector, they're conducting a reconnaissance sweep. They don't seem to be in any hurry, they're taking their time to study the system. How long before they reach Earth? At their current speed, approximately 18 hours. 18 hours. Had known this moment would come eventually, but she'd hoped for more time. Humanity had made incredible progress in the 15 years since discovering the galactic civilization, but they were still centuries behind in most technologies. Their ships were slower, their weapons weaker, their defenses more primitive. But they had one advantage the aliens couldn't possibly understand. "Signal all commands," ordered. "Activate Phase 2 of Protocol 7. Phase 2 was something no galactic species would ever think to implement, because no galactic species had ever needed to. It involved taking every advantage Earth's hostile environment had taught humanity to exploit and turning them into weapons of war. Commander Jackson Wright had been born in Antarctica and had spent his entire adult life in environments that would kill most humans within minutes. He was the perfect choice to command humanity's most insane defensive installation, a combat station built into the heart of an active volcano on Io, Jupiter's most geologically active moon. "Thermal readings are nominal," reported his engineering officer. "The lava tubes are providing perfect cover for our weapon systems." Wright nodded, watching the molten rock flow past the reinforced windows of his command center. Io was a moon that ejected sulfur compounds into space with volcanic explosions that could be seen from Earth. The radiation levels would kill most life forms in minutes. The surface temperature could melt lead. To humanity, it was just another place to build a military base. "Sir, we're detecting the alien fleet sensor sweeps. They're scanning the outer system, but they don't seem to be paying much attention to the Jovian moons." "Perfect. They probably can't imagine anyone being crazy enough to build anything here." The base on Io was one of dozens of hidden installations humanity had constructed throughout the solar system. There were combat platforms built into the asteroid belt, disguised to look like ordinary mining operations. Weapon systems had been carved into the lunar surface and covered with regolith. Attack fighters were hidden in caves on Mars, their heat signatures masked by the planet's own thermal emissions. Most importantly, there were the deep space mines. Captain Maria Santos commanded the mining vessel Deep Fortune, one of hundreds of similar ships that had been harvesting asteroids for decades. To any external observer, her ship looked like exactly what it was, an industrial platform designed to strip mineral resources from space rocks. What the aliens wouldn't discover until too late was that every one of these mining ships had been designed with a secondary purpose. "Fusion charges are armed and ready," her demolitions officer reported. "We've got enough firepower to crack this asteroid into 1,000,000 pieces." "And our friends?" 7 more mining ships in this cluster, all armed and ready. The aliens have been scanning the belt for the past 6 hours, but they're not detecting any weapons signatures. The genius of the deep space mines was their simplicity. Humanity had learned to move asteroids, to position them precisely where they wanted them, and to pack them full of enough explosive power to devastate anything within a significant radius. To aliens who had never needed to work in such dangerous environments, the asteroid belt would look like a natural navigation hazard. They would never suspect that hundreds of those asteroids were actually weapons waiting to be triggered. Contact from Luna Base, Santos communications officer announced. Admiral is requesting a status report. Santos activated the secure communication system. Deep Fortune reporting. All mining operations are green and ready. We're looking forward to showing our visitors how we extract resources out here. Back on Luna Base, Admiral was coordinating the most complex military operation in human history. Every defensive installation, every hidden weapon, every desperate gambit humanity had prepared was about to be tested against enemies they'd never seen. Admiral, the aliens are beginning active scanning of the inner system, reported Commander. They've detected our orbital installations around Earth and are requesting some kind of response. Any idea what they want? We've managed to decode part of their transmission. They're demanding that we surrender all technological installations and submit to what they're calling technological sterilization. Almost laughed. The aliens had spent centuries believing that Earth was uninhabitable, that no intelligent life could possibly exist there. Now they discovered not only that humans existed, but that they'd spread throughout the solar system and developed technology the aliens considered threatening. Their response was to demand surrender and the complete destruction of human civilization. Send a response, she ordered. What should we tell them? Looked out at Earth, hanging in the lunar sky like a blue jewel surrounded by the lights of orbital installations and defense platforms. Humanity had turned into home. They'd built cities on fault lines and next to volcanoes. They'd established bases on airless moons and in the vacuum of space. They'd survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and every other disaster the universe could throw at them. Now they were about to find out if they could survive aliens. Tell them we decline their offer, she said, and then show them what happens when you threaten. Fleet Commander stared at the translation matrix with an expression that would have been confusion on a human face. The primitive species from the HAD actually refused their generous offer of technological sterilization. More than that, their response had contained what the translation algorithms identified as hostile intent markers and combat threat indicators. Sir, are you certain this translation is accurate? Asked his communications officer, a delicate being whose species specialized in. Run it through the translation matrix again, ordered. Use the alternative cultural interpretation algorithms. The results were the same. The primitives were not only refusing to surrender their technology, they were actively threatening the cleansing fleet. It was unprecedented. In 8 centuries of such operations, no primitive species had ever responded with anything but fear or confusion. Most simply went silent when faced with superior technology, accepting their fate with the resignation of the clearly outmatched. Sir, we're also detecting increased energy emissions from their installations, reported his tactical officer. Multiple facilities throughout the system are powering up weapons that we didn't detect in our initial scans. This was even more confusing. How could primitive installations have weapons powerful enough to threaten galactic technology? Their energy signatures were clearly inferior to anything in the cleansing fleet's arsenal. Show me these weapon signatures. The tactical display lit up with dozens of energy readings throughout the solar system. Most were concentrated around the third planet and its satellite, but there were others scattered through what appeared to be an asteroid field and around several other planetary bodies. The technology was primitive but surprisingly widespread. Analysis. Unknown weapon types, sir. The energy signatures don't match any known galactic technology. They appear to be some kind of kinetic or explosive devices rather than proper energy weapons. Felt a moment of what his species might have called amusement. Kinetic weapons against ships equipped with energy shields and gravitational deflectors. Explosives against vessels that could withstand the pressure of gas giant atmospheres. It was like threatening a modern warship with stones and wooden clubs. Very well. Signal the fleet. We'll demonstrate the futility of primitive weapons before proceeding with standard cleansing protocols. Target their largest orbital installation first. Captain had been commanding the Earth Orbital Defense Platform Defiance for 3 years, ever since humanity first detected the galactic civilization and began preparing for this moment. The platform was humanity's largest space-based weapons installation, a massive construct that mounted dozens of particle beam weapons, missile pods, and point defense systems. It was also completely doomed. "Captain, the alien fleet is targeting us," reported her tactical officer. "Energy buildup on their lead vessel suggests they're preparing to fire." Nodded calmly. She'd known this moment would come from the day she accepted command of Defiance. The platform was humanity's most visible military installation, an obvious target for any alien attack. It was also designed to be exactly that, a target. "All stations prepare for incoming fire. Execute Protocol 9. Protocol 9 was humanity's most cynical defensive strategy. Instead of trying to protect their most important installations, they deliberately made some installations more visible and attractive targets than others. Defiance was packed with energy signatures, communication arrays, and other systems designed to make it look like the crown jewel of humanity's defense network. It was bait. The alien weapons were more advanced than anything humanity could build, but they weren't magic. When Fleet Commander ordered the destruction of what he thought was the Primitive's primary military installation, his gunners used exactly the amount of force they calculated would be necessary to eliminate the target. It was more than enough. Defiance's shields lasted approximately 3 seconds before the alien energy beams burned through them like tissue paper. The platform's hull, constructed from the strongest materials human industry could produce, lasted another 2 seconds before it began to vaporize under temperatures that could melt tungsten. Captain and her crew died quickly, their sacrifice buying humanity something more valuable than any weapons platform: information. "Admiral, we've got full sensor readings on the alien weapons," reported Commander. "Power output, beam frequency, targeting algorithms, everything we need." Admiral watched the destruction of Defiance on the main screen with the same expression she might have worn while reviewing casualty reports from any other battle. Had been a friend for 15 years. Her crew had been some of humanity's finest military personnel. Their deaths hurt, but they hadn't been in vain. Analysis. The weapons are exactly as powerful as we estimated, but they're designed for ship-to-ship combat. The targeting algorithms assume the target will be using Galactic Standard defensive technology. The power output is calibrated for shields and armor types that we don't use. Meaning they're using approximately 10 times more energy than they need to destroy our installations. Their weapons are devastating, but they're not efficient against our technology. This was crucial information. If the aliens were wasting energy with each shot, they would be limited in the number of targets they could engage before needing to recharge or resupply. More importantly, it meant their targeting systems weren't optimized for human technology. "Signal all commands," ordered. "Initiate the response pattern." Throughout the solar system, humanity's true defensive network came online. Commander Wright watched from his volcano base on Io as the first phase of humanity's counterattack began. The alien fleet had destroyed several of the more obvious Earth installations and was now moving closer to the planet, clearly confident that they'd eliminated any significant threat. They had no idea what was coming. "Thermal signature of the alien fleet," he asked his sensor operator. Reading clear heat patterns from their engines and weapon systems, they're not attempting to mask their emissions at all. "Perfect, signal the thermal lance batteries." Hidden throughout the solar system, camouflaged and shielded to be nearly invisible to standard sensors, were the weapons humanity had designed specifically for this moment. They weren't energy beams or missile systems, technologies where the aliens held a clear advantage. They were something far more primitive and far more devastating. The thermal lances were essentially giant versions of the mining lasers humanity used to carve up asteroids. They were designed to focus intense heat on small targets for extended periods, melting through solid rock to extract valuable minerals. Against enemy ships designed to withstand energy weapons, they should have been useless. But the aliens had never faced an enemy that would use industrial equipment as weapons of war. "Lances are locked on target," Wright reported, "beginning sustained bombardment." 23 thermal lance installations throughout the solar system opened fire simultaneously. Instead of trying to penetrate the aliens' shields with brief, powerful bursts, they maintained steady, continuous beams focused on the same small sections of each target ship. The aliens' defensive systems, designed to deflect or absorb weapon strikes, had never been tested against the kind of sustained industrial heating that could melt through asteroid cores. Fleet Commander watched in mounting alarm as his ships began reporting shield fluctuations. The primitive weapons weren't powerful enough to penetrate galactic defensive technology, but they were doing something his tactical computers couldn't explain. "Reports," he demanded. "Sir, the primitive energy beams are maintaining continuous contact with our shields. Our defensive systems are holding, but they're drawing more power than normal to dissipate the heat buildup." "How much more power?" "Approximately 40% above normal levels." That was a problem. Galactic shields were designed to stop powerful but brief attacks, the kind of weapons civilized species used against each other. They weren't designed to cope with sustained, continuous bombardment from industrial equipment. The primitives were essentially using mining tools to slowly cook his fleet. "Return fire. Eliminate those weapon installations immediately." This was exactly what humanity had hoped for. The aliens began targeting the thermal lance installations with the same devastating weapons they'd used against Defiance. But the lances weren't concentrated in large, obvious platforms. They were scattered throughout the solar system, hidden in asteroid caves and buried under lunar regolith and camouflaged among industrial installations. For every lance the aliens destroyed, they had to expend significant energy to locate and target it. Meanwhile, the remaining lances continued their sustained bombardment, forcing the alien ships to divert more and more power to their defensive systems. Captain Santos watched the battle developing on her mining ship's tactical display while putting the finishing touches on her own contribution to humanity's defense. Around her, 7 other mining vessels were completing similar preparations. "Fusion charges are armed and synchronized," her demolitions officer reported. "On your command, we can crack this entire asteroid cluster." "What about our guests?" 3 alien ships have moved into the asteroid belt to hunt for weapon installations. They're approximately 2,000 kilometers from our position. Santos smiled. 2,000 kilometers was point-blank range for an asteroid field explosion, especially when the asteroids had been carefully positioned and packed with enough fusion explosives to simulate a natural collision event. "All mining vessels, this is Deep Fortune. Initiate final extraction protocols." The 8 mining ships simultaneously detonated their fusion charges, cracking apart dozens of asteroids and sending millions of tons of rock and metal hurtling through space in all directions. To the alien sensors, it looked like a natural cascade failure, the kind of collision event that occasionally happened in asteroid belts. What they didn't realize until too late was that every piece of debris was on a carefully calculated trajectory. The 3 Saurian Brotherhood ships in the asteroid belt found themselves in the middle of what appeared to be a natural disaster. Millions of rocks, from pebbles to house-sized boulders, suddenly surrounded them in a rapidly expanding cloud of destruction. Their shields could handle the smaller debris, but the larger chunks carried enough kinetic energy to cause serious damage. More importantly, their sensors were completely blinded by the chaos. Energy signatures, heat sources, communication signals, everything disappeared in the electromagnetic storm created by high-velocity rock impacts. Which was when humanity's asteroid-based weapon platforms opened fire. Hidden inside the largest asteroids, protected by millions of tons of rock and metal, were weapon systems the aliens had never detected. They weren't advanced energy weapons. They were mass drivers, electromagnetic launchers designed to accelerate chunks of metal to significant fractions of light speed. The projectiles were simple, iron slugs, essentially bullets scaled up to the size of telephone poles. But when fired at relativistic velocities, even iron became devastatingly effective. Fleet Commander watched in shock as 3 of his ships simply vanished from the tactical display. The asteroid field had exploded. His sensors were detecting massive kinetic impacts, and then 3 ships that had been responding normally just stopped transmitting. "Status report," he demanded. "Unknown, sir. We're reading massive debris clouds where Strike Group 3 was operating. No response to communication attempts." This was impossible. Primitive species didn't have the technology to destroy galactic warships. They barely had capability. Yet somehow, 3 of his most advanced vessels had been eliminated by what appeared to be an asteroid field explosion. "Sir, we're also detecting new weapon installations throughout the system," his tactical officer reported. "They appear to have been hidden and are now coming online." The tactical display showed dozens of new energy signatures appearing throughout the solar system, weapon installations on planetary bodies that had appeared uninhabited, military platforms hidden among what had seemed like civilian installations, defensive systems that had been completely invisible until they began powering up. How many installations total? Current count is over 200 separate weapon systems, and more are still appearing. Fleet Commander felt something his species rarely experienced: uncertainty. This wasn't how primitive species were supposed to behave. They weren't supposed to have sophisticated defensive networks. They weren't supposed to use industrial equipment as weapons. They weren't supposed to hide military installations inside asteroid fields. Most importantly, they weren't supposed to be winning. "Sir, priority communication from the Galactic Council," his communications officer announced. "Ambassador Aura is requesting an immediate status report." Looked at his tactical display, where nearly 200 ships were now engaged in combat with an enemy that shouldn't have been able to threaten a single scout vessel. His shields were being drained by continuous industrial laser bombardment. His ships were dodging kinetic projectiles fired from hidden asteroid bases. His sensors were being jammed by communication networks that seemed to span the entire solar system. "Tell the ambassador," he said slowly, "that we may have underestimated the situation." Admiral stood in Luna Base's command center, watching as humanity's desperate gambit began to pay off. The alien fleet was powerful, more powerful than anything humans could face in direct combat. But they were also confused, disorganized, and completely unprepared for the kind of unconventional warfare that humans had perfected of surviving on a. "Status report," she ordered. "Enemy casualties, 3 ships confirmed destroyed, 7 more showing significant damage. Our casualties, approximately 40% of our defensive installations, but most of those were decoys or expendable positions. Phase 3. Ready to initiate on your command." Phase 3 was humanity's final gambit, the strategy they'd developed for the moment when conventional defensive operations were no longer sufficient. It involved abandoning any pretense of civilized warfare and embracing the lessons that Earth had taught them about survival. "Signal all commands," Admiral ordered. "Execute the protocol." Throughout the solar system, human forces received the signal they'd been preparing for since the first moment they'd learned about the galactic civilization. It was time to show these aliens what happened when you threatened a species that had learned to survive in hell itself. The real battle was about to begin.